I have been waiting for this handheld to arrive since December when I placed my order, and when it finally did arrive, I was relieved because I've heard so many horrible things when it comes to supporting Indiegogo or Kickstarter campaigns. So, trust me, I was very relieved when I actually got this in. I ordered a bunch of accessories with it too, since this one has been very critically acclaimed and I can finally understand why this is the case. So, introducing the AYN Odin Pro. I think this is actually the ultimate retro handheld and the most exciting one I've tested, so let's dive right in. For more content, do make sure to subscribe to this channel because we upload fairly often and focus on all sorts of tech products. So do make sure to leave us a like and comment any of your thoughts down below while you're at it. It really helps us with the algorithm. And if you want to support us further, then we've actually got a Patreon open which offers early access to content and special insight to projects that I'm always working on in case that is something that interests you. So links to everything down below. So I ordered some goodies to go along with my Odin Pro since it was touted to be a really good experience. I ordered AYN's carrying case that has some slots for what I'm assuming would only be your micro SD cards if you want to swap them out. This case is pretty thick and I would have preferred something smaller or thinner. I also purchased the docking station for it since I wanted to get the full experience and benefits of going for the Odin over other handhelds. I will talk about the stock in greater detail a little bit later, I promise. There is also the 65-watt charger with 2 USB-C ports and a USB-A port, along with the USB-C cable. Then you will find the box for the Odin, finally, and this is actually one of the nicest unboxings out there without a doubt. And inside of this one, you will find the Odin itself with another USB-A to USB-C cable for charging and data. It's a very simple yet elegant experience, but I also ordered a screen protector that they did not include, so I'm SOL since I haven't been able to find any third-party alternatives at all. But anyway. The exterior design consists of plastic for the entirety of the build. This device also has a very interesting shape to it because it is somewhere between a Nintendo Switch Lite and a Nintendo Switch OLED in terms of size. However, I must say that this handle looks really good and feels very good too. It's not the heftiest or best build out there, but it is still a very nice build that they've got going on here. On the front, you're going to find your buttons layout with a Nintendo layout. Unfortunately, I was genuinely hoping for an Xbox layout instead, but the buttons feel very good and the D-pad is not as good as Vita D-pad, unlike everything that I've heard up until now, but it is still a very good D-pad nonetheless. It's nice and clicky, which is exactly how I like it. The thumbsticks are very solid too, and the positioning is fine for me as well. On the top, you're going to find your shoulder buttons with analog triggers, a compartment that houses a micro SD card slot and the micro HDMI port, cooling, volume controls, and a sleep-wake button. On the bottom, you're going to find stereo speakers, a headphone jack, a USB-C port, and then on the back, you're going to find cooling vents, some grips, and 2 remappable buttons. On each side of this device, you're going to find the LED lights, and you will also see them by the thumbsticks, which is awesome. In terms of this device's ergonomics, we definitely have a winner, but it's the aesthetic that really separates this device from the rest of the market in my opinion. I think that this is the best looking handheld out there. This device features a 6-inch 1920 by 1080 IPS display with a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. This display is very nice. It's nice and colorful, but not overly so, and it certainly gets pretty bright. This is just a very pleasant display to look at, and I think that they did a great job with it. You do get deep darks and bright whites, even though this is not an OLED display. This is a very impressive screen that is included with this budget, and I really like it, and it is a touchscreen to make navigating Android a great experience overall. For my usage, I honestly have no complaints about the screen and find it to be my favorite of any retro handheld that I have tested to this day. So like I mentioned earlier, this device features stereo, bottom-firing speakers that sound pretty good. They get reasonably loud, and while they do certainly distort a little bit at max volume, the speakers do sound pretty good. So why don't you have a listen? This device features a Snapdragon 845 CPU, an Adreno 630 GPU, 256GB of storage for my unit, 8GB of RAM, Bluetooth 5.0, Android 10 for its OS, and a 6000 mAh battery. This is a very powerful device, even for the money, and in terms of the hardware, it's packed quite nicely. But from here, we're going to talk about the gaming experience with emulation and game streaming. So let's dive right into that. Now let's go ahead and talk about gaming performance, especially or specifically with N64 for now, but we will be testing a lot of different systems here. N64 through the Mupen emulator was pretty alright, but certainly had some issues. As far as I know, this is the best emulator for N64, and performance was somewhat disappointing. I tested out Ocarina of Time for this system, by the way. For the most part, it was great, but there were some occasions where you would notice micro stutters. In other words, performance was pretty great for the most part, with it running pretty well, about what I would expect from a device like this, and even one that's lower end. But then the micro stutters would kick in every now and then, and it did take me out of the game for a bit. It was enough to break my immersion, so I wouldn't really get the AYN Odin for N64 specifically. But if you already plan on getting one for other systems, then it doesn't really matter. The AYN Odin will still offer great N64 performance for the most part. With PlayStation 1, using DuckStation emulator, I had perfect performance just as I expected. I tested out Mortal Kombat 4 for this emulation test, but I did play some RPGs on here such as Final Fantasy 9, Tactics, and more with amazing results. However, I can say with a lot of confidence that PlayStation 1 is an absolute treat with this system and this emulator. When you combine a fantastic emulator with very good hardware, you should expect great things out of systems that are this old. I mean, I won't dedicate a section to SNES, but SNES was also flawless here, so I would say that there's nothing to worry about here regarding either of those systems. This device will absolutely crush those emulators, no problem. PSP through the PPS's PP emulator was also another fantastic performer. I tested out games like Persona 3 Portable, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, Crisis Core, and many more, but I really wanted to showcase God of War Ghosts of Sparta for the test because of how well it performed. At 3x resolution, which is actually the default when I started this up, you can squeeze quite a lot out of this game considering that it is one of the most demanding games on the PSP. It runs beautifully and looks beautiful with some stutters here and there, but it still offers a great balance between performance and visuals. However, you should have a near flawless experience at 2x resolution, which is a huge win for a game like this. All of the PSP games I mentioned, by the way, do run beautifully between 3x and 4x resolution, which is pretty fantastic. This is an amazing device for PSP games because not only do you have access to a great emulator for them, but PSP is also one of the systems that is easier to emulate in general for a lot of devices. The Odin Pro is no exception to this, so, awesome stuff here, of course. Now, performance with Dreamcast on the Redream emulator is probably as close to perfect as you will get. This emulator is extremely well optimized and supported, not to mention that we've got very powerful mobile hardware here. This is probably the best way to play Sonic Adventure 2 as well because of how well it runs. I experienced zero performance issues, zero visual issues, and extremely consistent performance. This is another huge win as Dreamcast runs way too well on this system. Even the most demanding sections of the game run smooth as butter, which does count for a lot here. You can even stretch this nicely to fit a 16:9 aspect ratio, but it doesn't really reach all the way. And it still looks really damn good, in my opinion. Now, this is when we touch on the harder to emulate systems, which for this review will be GameCube and PlayStation 2. Let's begin with GameCube on the Dolphin emulator, which was kind of disappointing if I'm going to be honest. Most GameCube games ran with stuttering issues and often audio issues that made the experience less than enjoyable. For example, I will be showing gameplay over here of Twilight Princess, which was actually one of the games that I tested that ran the best. When it came to games like Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Adventure 2, the GameCube port, both games ran fine in such sections, but with plenty of audio issues and frame rate issues in other sections. It was maybe 40% fine performance and then 60% subpar performance with issues. When it came to the frequency, it was a bit too often for my liking. I also tested out other games like Pokemon XD, which performed poorly outside of battle, which is kind of awful. This is the reality that I face when playing GameCube games, which is such a shame. I would strongly urge you to ask around to see if the games that you want to play run okay before making the purchase, because I feel like this device should do better when it comes to GameCube. So I am disappointed, and this performance is why I didn't really bother to test the Wii, as I have very low expectations. At least this is the case when it comes to its performance in OpenGL, which is the default API. But if you switch over to Vulkan, then I actually noticed some performance improvements in a pretty significant way. It made games like Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog playable with better audio audio, but mostly the issues will still be audio related. However, in terms of just the overall performance, switching over to the Vulkan API appears to be the best choice for all of the games that I tested at least. PlayStation 2 Performance, however, was noticeably better than GameCube through the Ether X2 emulator. I tested a variety of games in different genres and styles to see how well it would fare, and I was surprised. Games like Final Fantasy XII and Dragon Quest X performed actually pretty well, and with little slowdown for the most part. Granted, there was still slowdown, but not a lot. And other games like Kingdom Hearts 2 and Devil May Cry 2 also ran fairly well, but Devil May Cry had significant slowdown when enemies appeared on screen, which is not good. So I would argue that this won't be the best device for PS2 emulation, but still pretty decent. Actually, something like Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 ran surprisingly well and is totally playable on the system. It was actually pretty impressive. But there are some games that are harder to run on this, such as Mortal Kombat Armageddon, with very significant slowdowns during combat, and something like Dirge of Cerberus definitely has its fair share of slowdowns too. So I would say that for turn-based games and some other JRPGs, the performance should be sufficient, as something like Persona 4 and Persona 3 FES are basically completely playable on the system, but more action-oriented games will certainly struggle. So one thing that did surprise me was the streaming performance. This device features 5G support, which means that you can get some rather impressive speeds with it. I tested out Final Fantasy 15 using Google Stadia to great results, quite frankly, and I know that I keep bringing up Final Fantasy games. The visuals were pretty fantastic and the game ran pretty well, minus some stutters here and there. The stutters weren't too frequent, but quite severe when they would happen. Either way, I think that this will be a really good device for game streaming, and most people should be pretty happy if they wanted the Odin for just that. Now, you can purchase a separate dock for this device, which to me is a must-have for handheld that costs this much. The dock that's specifically made for the Odin is rather large and has this piece of plastic in the front to protect the screen. Now, on the front, you're going to find two USB 3.0 ports and two connectors for using N64 controllers. On each side, you're going to find a different connector for using GameCube controllers, but you'll also find an HDMI port on the left side specifically. Then on the back, you're going to find a USB-C port for power, HDMI port, 4 USB 3.0 ports, and an Ethernet port. You can also install a SATA SSD or hard drive that's small enough to fit in the casing on the back. So all of these things sound great and well thought out, but here's why I don't really like this dock. It doesn't seem to be working properly for me. It will present just fine on any screen, but the dock seems to struggle to charge the Odin when it's in unless I've situated it perfectly, even if the USB-C connector is in and in place. I don't know why this is the case whatsoever, and it does mess with the experience of using the Odin dock, so I don't do it very often. However, I could not get it to present at all for this video, and it doesn't appear to be working at all besides the GameCube ports. I will be waiting for AYN to reply and hopefully help me resolve this issue. I'm sorry that I could not get it resolved by the time that this review came out, but they're currently on vacation. But I believe that it is important to share these issues anyway and concerns on these reviews just in case. The battery life, however, seems to be pretty good on this device. You can expect about 3 to 4 hours of battery life while gaming, but it will depend drastically also on which games you're playing on it. For example, GameCube and PlayStation 2 will definitely drain the system's battery more quickly, but overall the battery life is pretty good in my opinion. So here is my conclusion, and yeah, this has been a long video. I think that so far for the price to performance ratio, this is the ultimate retro handheld. You will be hard-pressed to find anything like it for this price, guaranteed. So while I wouldn't suggest necessarily going straight to the Indiegogo campaign, I would just wait for this device to be available for retail at some point. Because when it does become available for just slightly under $300, I think, this is still a very powerful handheld, and it will only get better with time and more software updates. You can also definitely mess with the settings to squeeze more performance out of this device with most emulators. And regarding the dock, I think that I just got unlucky with this batch, but I'm pretty comfortable recommending this device, of course, as long as you can keep your expectations in check. But again, you should be fine when it comes to tailoring the experience to your liking. So yes, strongly recommended. And when the Odin is available for retail, I will make another video revisiting this system to see how much it has improved in the time being. But I also want to make a video about the Windows experience, so we will see about that. So for now, this has just been Android focused. Spoiler alert for the very end of this video, which we are at. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way up until the very end. It is always appreciated. And I hope that this video was very helpful to you. I would like to give a very special thanks to all of our patrons, beginning with the tier 3s, which are going to be Omar. Thank you so much for all of your support, because it really does go a very long way. And to the rest of you, the tier 2s and even the tier 1s, like, thank you so much for everything. Your name should be on the screen right now. And yeah, again, thanks a lot for all of your support. Now, don't forget to follow me on Twitch, where I should have a streaming schedule coming up pretty soon. I have been just streaming sporadically, though I did take a bit of a break. And you can also follow me on Instagram, where I do post every now and then. But with that said, this has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and until next time, enjoy. Bye-bye.